Stop what you're doing for 10 seconds. Silver didn't pull back. It got yanked off a cliff. We just watched a move that normally takes weeks happen in hours. Mid-90s down into the low 80s. A straight, ugly drop that felt like the floor disappeared. And gold didn't behave like a calm anchor either. It slipped through a major level and kept bleeding. That combination is the giveaway. This wasn't a normal market day. This was a forced selling day. And if we misread the difference, we pay for it. This is our channel. This is our community. We don't chase feelings. We measure pressure. Now watch this. When you see gold and silver dropping together while the world is loud and tense, your brain wants one clean explanation. People stop believing. No. Belief doesn't move like this. Belief sells in waves. It hesitates. It bargains. It looks around. This move was mechanical, like a trapdoor, like someone hit a kill switch. And the market didn't ask permission. It just executed. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In a real liquidity squeeze, the market doesn't sell what it hates. It sells what it can. Gold is liquid. Silver futures are liquid, so they get turned into cash fast. Not because the story changed, because the margin bill arrived. If you've never experienced a margin cascade, it feels like reality is broken. It isn't. The plumbing is. And today, the plumbing screamed. Let's start with what actually happened. Price ran into a zone that mattered. It got rejected. Then it didn't stabilize near the rejection. It kept falling. That's the red flag. When a rejection becomes a breakdown, it means buyers didn't just step back. They got wiped. Stops got hit. Leverage got crushed. And once that chain starts, it feeds itself. Silver made it worse because silver is not a small gold. Silver is a spring. Gold is the weight. When the weight shifts, the spring snaps. That's why a 5% move in gold can translate into a 15% move in silver. Not always, but in stressed markets, often, and in panic, almost. So when silver goes from the mid-90s into the low 80s with no respect for support, we don't call it volatility. We call it a liquidation event. Now here's the part most people ignore because it sounds boring. The funding markets, the back room, the place where institutions borrow cash overnight, the repo market. Think of repo like the emergency hallway in a hospital. Most days it's quiet, then one day sirens. When we see a sudden chunky pull for emergency cash, it's telling us somebody needed dollars immediately, not soon, not tomorrow, immediately. And that lines up with what we're seeing on the screen. A cascade needs fuel. The fuel is leverage. Here's how the cascade works in plain terms. Funds and traders hold gold and silver on margin. The price drops hard. Their broker demands more collateral. If they can't post it fast, positions get closed at market. Closed means sold. Sold means price drops more. Price dropping more creates more margin calls. And the loop tightens like a noose. That's why the chart looks like a waterfall. It's not a crowd calmly deciding to exit. It's a crowd getting shoved through one narrow door. Now let's be careful with language. Fact, silver dumped rapidly from the 90s into the 80s. Fact, gold fell through a key area and kept sliding. Interpretation, this looks like forced liquidation driven by leverage and funding stress. We're not guessing that because it sounds dramatic. We're guessing it because the structure matches. Fast, straight, no floors, broad selling across assets. That's the signature. Now if you're thinking, okay, but who caused it? Here's what we need to understand. Markets don't require a single villain. They require incentives. If leverage is crowded in one direction, price doesn't need news to crash. It needs one push into the stop zone. Stops are gasoline. Once they ignite, the market does the rest. And the people who benefit are the ones who can survive the chaos. The ones with cash. The ones who aren't forced to sell. The ones who can buy when everybody else is panicking. That is the wealth transfer nobody wants to talk about. And that is why days like this feel personal. Because it's not just price, it's psychology. The market uses hope like bait. It lets you breathe. Then it hits you again. So if you saw a little bounce and thought, we're safe, I get it. That's exactly what the tape is designed to make you feel. During liquidation, rebounds are not mercy. They're setup. Lower highs form, then the next leg hits. That's how the machine shakes out weak hands. Now, here's our first big question. If gold and silver are dead, why do large players keep treating physical metal like a strategic asset? That question matters because there are two markets. The paper market on screens, and the physical market in vaults. Paper can crash from leverage without physical suddenly becoming abundant, so we don't confuse a paper flush with a supply miracle. We separate them. We stay adult about it. 1 ounce is still 1 ounce. The bar doesn't lose weight because a futures contract imploded. Now, I'm going to say something that makes people uncomfortable. In a real squeeze, even safe havens get sold because safe doesn't pay the margin call. Cash pays the margin call, and when everyone reaches for cash at once, correlations go to 1. Everything sells off together. Gold, silver, crypto, sometimes stocks, sometimes even bonds. That's the tell. When everything drops at once, it's not a thoughtful reallocation. It's a desperate liquidation. So we ask the right question. Not, is the thesis broken? We ask, is the selling voluntary or forced? Because voluntary selling finds a floor. Forced selling ignores floors. Forced selling stops only when the margin calls stop. That's it. Now watch this next part because it's where most people lose. They try to pick the bottom based on emotion. They see red candles and want revenge. They see green candles and want relief. Neither is a strategy. We are not gambling. We are measuring. So we build a simple framework. We want to see price stop falling in free fall. We want to see ranges shrink. We want to see funding stress cool. We want to see the market hold a level for full sessions, not 5 minutes. Those are signals of exhaustion. Until then, we treat bounces as bounces, not as salvation. Now let's connect this to the broader risk picture. When geopolitical tension rises, energy risk rises. Energy risk feeds inflation risk. Inflation risk feeds rate expectations. Rate expectations pressure bonds. And if bonds don't act like a safe place, the whole "where does money hide" map gets scrambled. In that environment, the market can do something that looks insane. It can sell gold during fear, not because fear is gone, because liquidity is gone. And liquidity drives the short term. That's why today feels like the market is lying. It isn't lying, it's choking. Now let's talk about the most dangerous phrase in this entire space. It can't go lower. Yes, it can. A leveraged market can always go lower than logic because logic isn't the boss during margin calls, margin is. So we don't make absolute statements, we speak in probabilities. Certain the move was violent, likely leverage unwound. Possible another leg occurs if funding stress stays high. Now, the second big question, if this was a forced liquidation, what ends it? Not headlines, not feelings. Exhaustion ends it. Exhaustion is when sellers run out of ammo, when the candles get smaller, when the tape slows down, when the market stops slicing through levels like butter, when buyers finally defend a zone repeatedly, and when the funding gauges stop flashing red. That's the end game. Now, I want to address the emotional side directly. A lot of us hold metals because we distrust the system's promises. So when metals drop like this, it feels like betrayal. It feels like the thing we bought as protection is failing us. But protection is not the same as short-term price stability. A fire extinguisher doesn't stop smoke from appearing. It stops your house from burning down. Metals can still serve the long-term role even if they get liquidated short-term. The key is how we structure our risk. If you're holding physical with no leverage, you can outlast a paper flush. If you're holding leveraged exposure, volatility can force you out even if you're right. That's the difference. That's why leverage is the silent killer. It doesn't just amplify returns, it compresses time. It turns a normal drawdown into instant death. So if you're watching this and you're on leverage, hear me. Survival first. If you're watching this and you're not on leverage, hear me too. Patience and signals. Now let's zoom into the psychological playbook we keep seeing in these markets. Run price up, pull retail in, dump price, cause panic, bounce it a bit, restore hope, dump it harder. Hope is the hook. Pain is the reel. And every cycle transfers metal and money from impulsive hands to patient hands. This is why we use we language in this community, because we're not isolated. We're a group learning the same game. And if we learn it, the game loses power. Now we need to talk about levels without turning this into a boring lecture. A level is just a place where lots of orders sit. Support is a shelf. If the shelf breaks, everything above it falls. Resistance is a ceiling. If price hits it and gets rejected, sellers are waiting there. When a ceiling rejects and price collapses past the shelf below, it means the room just changed. That's what we saw. Now, one more retention beat. If gold was supposed to be the calm anchor, why did it accelerate downward after the rejection instead of stabilizing? Because once the first wave of stops hit, more stops got pulled into the flow. And because gold is liquid, it becomes a funding source. This is why gold can drop during stress. It's not about faith, it's about liquidity. Now let's look at history in a way that actually helps us. In big crises, metals often dip first. Not because they're useless, because liquidity is king at the start. Then, after the forced liquidation ends, metals can reprice higher as reality catches up. We saw versions of this in previous cycles. Crisis hits, everything sells, then the dust settles. Then the assets with strong long-term narratives reassert. The forced selling is usually temporary. The repricing can last years. So the question is never, will price recover? The question is, who survives the flush? That's the real game. Now, I'm not going to promise you a bottom. Nobody can. And anyone who does is selling you comfort, not truth. What we can do is watch the signs. And we can be honest about risk. The market can bounce hard from oversold. It can also trap you with a bounce and then dump again. Both happen, so we don't chase. We wait for confirmation. We watch for stability. We watch for exhaustion. And we protect our downside. Now, I want to bring the physical side back in because it matters. A paper price can crash faster than supply chains adjust. Physical markets move slower. They have inventory friction. They have shipping friction. They have refining friction. So when paper dumps, it can create a disconnect. Sometimes that disconnect shows up as premiums. Sometimes as tight availability. Sometimes as delivery interest. We watch that because it tells us whether paper is printing a price that doesn't reflect physical reality. Now, here's the part that should make you think. If a liquidity squeeze is forcing selling today, what happens when the squeeze eases? Where does the money go next? Does it go back into risk? Does it go into hard assets? Does it sit in cash longer? The answer matters because it shapes the next cycle. And this is why we stay engaged. Because the next move won't come with a warning label. It will just happen. So here's what we do right now. We keep our heads, we stay out of emotional decisions, we respect volatility, we look for the exhaustion fingerprints, and we don't let one brutal day rewrite a long-term story. Here's the trap that catches most people right after a move like this. We stare at the 5-minute chart and start bargaining. If we bounce $10, we're safe. But liquidation markets bounce like a broken elevator. Up fast, down faster, because the orders aren't human. They're forced. So we stop asking the market to be fair, and we start reading the stress. 2 definitions, 1 line each. Liquidity is the ability to sell without moving price. Volatility is the price you pay when liquidity vanishes. Today, liquidity thinned. Volatility charged a tax. And silver paid it first, because silver is the springiest metal on the screen. Now, if you keep hearing manipulation, here's the productive way to frame it. Paper can be pushed around most when the crowd is over-leveraged. Over-leverage is dry grass. Stops are gasoline. One shove into a stop pocket and the whole field lights up by itself. So we don't need a cartoon villain. We need to understand incentives. Cash-rich players love panic. Panic brings forced sellers. Forced sellers bring discounts. Discounts bring accumulation. That's the oldest trade in finance. Now, how do we spot whether panic is still in control? We don't guess bottoms. We watch exhaustion. Exhaustion looks like this. The candles stop expanding. The speed slows. Lower lows stop printing every hour. Price starts chopping instead of falling through air. And most importantly, the market holds a zone for full sessions, not minutes. If we don't see that, we don't declare victory. We respect the possibility of aftershocks. Because liquidation events rarely end cleanly. They end messy. They end confusing. They end with bounces that feel like relief and then dumps that feel like betrayal. That confusion is where accounts get destroyed. So we plan for confusion. We don't chase green. We don't revenge buy red. We size like adults. We manage risk like adults. 1-line disclaimer, always, this is educational. We manage risk. Now let's bring it back to the physical side because this matters for how we interpret the pain. A bar in your hand can't be margin called. A futures position can. That's why leverage is the silent killer. It doesn't just amplify gains, it compresses time. It turns a normal drawdown into an emergency. So if you're using leverage, your first goal is survival. If you're not using leverage, your first goal is patience and signals. Same market, different rules. Now here's a question that will tell us a lot about what comes next. If this was truly the story breaking, where did the money go? Because real rotations have winners. Liquidations don't. If everything is read together, that's not a thoughtful shift. That's a cash scramble. Now another question, and answer it honestly in the comments because it helps all of us. Did this drop shake you out, or did it make you more interested? Type 1 word, shook or curious. And second, do you think this was mainly a margin cascade or deeper system stress? Type margin or system. Now here's what we watch next without pretending we can see the future. We watch whether gold stabilizes instead of slicing lower. We watch whether silver stops making instant lower lows and starts rejecting cheaper prices. We watch whether volatility calms from monster to manageable. And we watch whether paper price starts behaving like a market again, not like a liquidation engine, because when that shift happens, it happens fast. And the people who are prepared get the benefit. The people who are emotional get the lesson. So keep your head. Keep your sizing sane. Keep your eyes on the tape, not the noise. And if you want our next breakdown the moment the next wave hits, subscribe now, because the next chapter will reveal whether this was a temporary flush or the opening act of something bigger. One more thing we need to keep in our heads because this is where history helps. In major stress moments, metals can drop first and rip later. Not because they failed, because liquidity comes first and fundamentals come after. We've seen that rhythm before. Crisis hits, everything sells, then the assets tied to long-term scarcity and trust reprice once forced sellers are gone. So the real question becomes, can we stay in the game long enough to see the second phase? And we answer that with risk management, not hope. Also, don't ignore the gap between paper quotes and the real-world cost to actually get metal. If paper dumps but physical remains stubborn, availability tight, premium sticky, that's a signal the paper move is outrunning physical reality. If physical also loosens, that's a different message. We don't need perfection, we need direction. Now watch the bounce. The most dangerous moment is not the low. It's the first bounce that convinces everyone the low is in. That's where traps get set. That's where late buyers get pulled in, and that's where the next dump can hit hardest. So if we get a sharp green day, we don't automatically celebrate. We ask, did the market hold it? Did it close strong? Did the selling pressure actually fade? If not, we stay cautious, because liquidation markets love to hand out hope right before they hand out pain. And if we're wrong, it will show fast. Premiums collapse, funding stress spikes again, and price can't hold any bounce. That's our early warning. We watch it together in real time, not with blind faith,